It's Thursday, July 16th. In the headlines, Transport Minister Darryl Vaz addresses traffic ticket backlog. In business news, Statin reports increase in inflation. Regionally, Guyana's Housing Ministry launches Housing Foundation program. And in sports, West Indies women complete one-day international sweep of Ireland. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. Transport Minister Darryl Vaz has acknowledged that it will be challenging to clear the backlog of more than 1 million outstanding traffic tickets before the administrative demerit points system takes effect on October 1. Speaking at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing, Minister Vaz said the country currently has 1.1 million unresolved traffic tickets, leaving many motorists at risk of penalties under the new regime.
Several operational realities have been identified: the significant volume of unresolved traffic cases, the availability of judicial and administrative resources, the limited physical capacity of courts, and the legal requirement that traffic matters generally be heard within the parish where the offense occurred.
He revealed that a stakeholder group has been established to develop a practical solution to the problem.
It is this stakeholder group that is going to navigate now to come up with a practical solution. So what we have is something that's in theory sounds good, but you know I talk straight. It's almost impossible, if not impossible, to do what needs to be done in the time that it needs to be done with the resources that are available.
Despite the challenges, the minister insisted the government will not be pressured into postponing the implementation of the demerit points system.
Operationally, we'll continue working with the judiciary to explore additional judicial resources, increase administrative support, expanded traffic court capacity, extended court sittings where practical. Simultaneously, consideration is being given to carefully crafted transitional legislative amendments that would provide a fair, transparent, and lawful framework for addressing qualifying legacy matters while preserving the integrity of the Road Traffic Act.
Meanwhile, Minister Vaz announced the appointment of Lieutenant Colonel Sheldon Bryan as the new Director General of the Island Traffic Authority to oversee modernization and road safety initiatives. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has expanded its family caregiver program to the Spanish Town Hospital, giving more patients the opportunity to receive support from loved ones during their hospital stay. The initiative, first introduced at the Bustamante Hospital for Children earlier this year, allows registered family members to play an active role in patient care. Speaking at the official launch on Wednesday, Minister of Health and Wellness Dr. Christopher Tufton said while healthcare professionals provide expert clinical care, families provide reassurance.
One of the big hopeful advantages of this is that when mommy or sister or cousin qualifies to support their patient, their relative, they will also have an appreciation for what healthcare involves. And hopefully they'll take it back to the community and explain that it's not wicked, the doctor wicked or the nurse wicked, but them have a whole patient to deal with. You have a headache, that man have a heart attack. We have to deal with the heart attack man first.
Since the pilot began, 1,053 caregivers have supported 737 patients. Caregivers say the program has made them feel more confident and better prepared to care for their relatives.
I am of the view, based on the reports I've had, and I check on this frequently, that it has been an extremely rewarding experience, both from this perspective of the clinicians, the management of the institution, the patients and family members, because it has done several things. It has brought together all concerned in providing curative measures, therapy for a patient who is suffering.
The ministry says the initiative has also improved communication between healthcare workers and families.
And previous to that, there were many complaints that visiting hours was too short. Family members are stressed out, don't know what's happening to their loved ones. Sometimes we're not giving them the information that they think they deserve to get. And it created an antagonistic relationship between the providers of the service, as well-intentioned as they are, and those who are hoping to benefit from the service or the loved ones who want their family members to benefit. It's a big deal.
The program will continue to roll out to other public health facilities as part of the ministry's effort to strengthen compassionate, patient and family-centered healthcare. Jamaica is set to introduce flexible work hours to boost productivity, reduce traffic, and empower workers. However, questions remain about the potential risks. Our reporter Marlon Samuels has examined the issues, and he filed this report.
The Jamaican government has announced plans to implement flexible work hours across various sectors.
In 2026, circular number 2 was put out by the Ministry of Finance with effect from February 1 this year, and it facilitated the rollout of the staggered working hours policy. Who gives us that authority? The Ministry of Finance has that authority based on the Constitution, based on the assignments of subjects, and the Ministry of Finance is the central authority for public sector management, public sector modernization, compensation policy, strategic HR policy, and administrative reform. And so it uses various means to administer these policies, and such circulars and policy directives and policy instructions are some of those instruments.
The new policy will allow companies to offer employees flexible start and end times within set limits. The aim: cut traffic congestion, lower commuting costs, and improve job satisfaction.
We did recognize the traffic situation, separate apart from fuel, the traffic situation in the mornings and the evenings. And so we felt that this was a means of reducing the congestion. And so that would have been some of the reasons behind pushing this.
The number of hours that commuters spent each year commuting in congestion-related areas was 793 hours. And one thing I think we haven't spoken about is what the impact that does to your physical state and your mental state. What is the cost beyond fuel, non-communicable diseases? Can that be, or should that be quantified?
Supporters say flexible schedules can boost productivity, improve mental health, and help retain employees. They argue that workers will be able to better manage personal responsibilities, promoting a healthier work-life balance.
70% of employees surveyed benefited from flexible work modalities, the work from home and the staggered working hours. 80% of entities reported higher engagement, and 70% of engaged entities reported improved output.
There was, in fact, a survey carried out. So after 30 MDAs that have implemented the flexible work arrangements since February of this year, 10 were recently, up to 30 that were surveyed, 10 of them indicated, which is approximately 30%, where 77% of those organizations noted either significant or slight improvements in output since adopting the FWAs.
However, critics warn of possible issues. They believe that flexible hours could cause communication breakdowns, reduce teamwork, and make performance monitoring harder.
We're wanting to implement a policy because it is recommended without having the back end in a place that benefits those who are putting a part of the flexi work arrangement. We won't get the productivity out of them as what the World Bank document is telling us that we need to achieve.
You can't jump into it without the proper planning. And I think that may have been the case with the likes of Amazon. So we can learn from those mistakes and make sure that if we're going to engage our staff in working remotely, that we have proper measures in place, KPIs, performance metrics, and the use of AI. I think there's a massive opportunity to utilize AI to make sure that we are getting the output that we need.
And as a responsible entity, the Ministry of Finance is implementing policies, and they're already doing the tests and doing the surveys to show that it can work.
Small businesses in particular fear that the lack of structure might affect service quality.
8 in every 10 employment is created by small businesses, and we have approximately over 40% of the national income is through small businesses, and then we have thousands of informal businesses, micro and small businesses that are not registered. Now, most of our small businesses, they require a physical space to operate from, and we find that it will be difficult for majority of them to actually work from home. We find that some of them that can actually operate remotely don't have the resources, so they lack laptops that they could use, or they have home internet issues or even backup power issues.
The government says the change will be implemented gradually, with clear guidelines to support both employers and employees. The goal is to find a balance that promotes flexibility while maintaining productivity.
Jamaica's move towards flexible work hours is a major step in redefining the future of work. Success depends on careful implementation and ongoing evaluation. I am Marlon Samuels reporting for the news on PBCJ.
In business news, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin, says the All Jamaica Consumer Price Index rose by 0.8% during the month, driving up Jamaica's inflation rate in June. The increase was driven mainly by higher transportation costs, following an 8% increase in route taxi and hackney carriage fares that took effect on June 2. Food prices also contributed to the rise in inflation. Statin says the food and non-alcoholic beverages division increased by 0.7%, reflecting higher prices for agricultural produce, including carrots, cabbage, onions, and sweet peppers. Housing costs also went up, with the housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels division rising by 0.5% because of higher rents and electricity charges. The state agency says the point-to-point inflation rate, which compares prices in June this year with June last year, climbed to 6.7%. The increase was led by higher prices in food, transportation, and housing. The resumption of trading of shares of the Derrimon Trading Company Limited has resumed as the Jamaica Stock Exchange has lifted its suspension of the junior market company. In an advisory, the JSE reports that in keeping with its Junior Market Rule Appendix 2, Part 4, Subsection 2E, it has taken the decision to immediately lift the suspension of trading in the shares of DTL. This move comes as the distribution-led group has submitted its 2025 audited financial statements and Q1 unaudited report for the period ending March 31, 2026 on July 10, 2026. Time now for the market snapshot and other financial news from Denise Williams.
For the trading period of July 15, 2026, the most actively traded securities were Trans-Jamaica Highway Limited with 9,192,482 units, representing 32.20% of the market sales activities. Wigton Energy Limited with 9,192,482 units, representing 32.2% of market sales activities. Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial with 2,607,016 units, representing 9.13% of market sales activities. Investor activity remained concentrated in transportation, finance, and distribution plays, signaling continued interest in dividend-producing and strategic assets. Turning to the foreign exchange market based on Bank of Jamaica data for July 15, 2026. Forex traders recorded significant activity with strong demand across major currencies. For the US dollar, trading margins reflected steady liquidity, with the US selling at $158.96 and buying at $157.48. For the Canadian dollar, moderate gains supported by 46-cent transaction spreads. The Canadian dollar sold for $112.79 and was bought for $112.33. For the British pound, continued volatility offered short-term trading opportunities of $3.58 in profits for the bank. The British pound sold for $212.53 and was bought for $208.95. These movements underscore the importance of cash flow timing and currency awareness for businesses managing import costs, debt servicing, or overseas exposure. For our credit report tip of the day, your credit score tells lenders a story. So what story are you writing? Lenders don't just look at whether you borrow, they look at how you borrow. Relying heavily on high-interest credit cards, constantly refinancing personal loans, or repeatedly using microfinance loans can signal financial pressure, even when payments are made on time. These borrowing patterns may affect your credit profile and influence future lending decisions. Every credit decision becomes part of your financial reputation. Borrow with intention, manage debt wisely, and remember that today's financial habits can determine tomorrow's opportunities. In our Focus and Funded feature, access to funding is no longer determined solely by your pitch. It is increasingly influenced by the quality of your data. As artificial intelligence becomes embedded in lending, investing, and grant making, entrepreneurs are being evaluated on their financial records, business performance, and ability to demonstrate measurable results. The businesses that stand out are those that are organized, transparent, and able to provide credible evidence of growth and sustainability. Rather than viewing AI as a barrier, entrepreneurs should see it as an opportunity. Those who embrace technology to strengthen their financial reporting, refine their business models, and improve their funding proposals will be better positioned to secure loans, attract investors, and win grant funding in an increasingly data-driven economy. And that's today's business report. I'm Denise Williams. Until next time, stay informed, stay intentional, and keep building forward. See you soon.
In regional news, in Guyana, the Central Housing and Planning Authority has launched its Foundation Program in Region 3. The Foundation Program joins a series of housing initiatives introduced by the government to improve access to affordable home ownership, while supporting the construction of safe, durable houses. We have more in this report from News Source Guyana.
The program is designed to assist allottees in constructing their homes by offering them standardized foundation options that support timely development of their allocated lots and increase occupancy within the housing schemes. Additionally, the program is designed to encourage timely development of the house lots and to improve access to affordable home ownership for low and income level families. In a statement, the Housing Ministry said, under the initiative, beneficiaries will have access to foundation designs in 400 square feet, 600 square feet, and 950 square feet configurations, creating a solid starting point for future home construction, while advancing the government's commitment to expanding affordable housing opportunities for Guyanese families. In the coming weeks, the ministry explained, the initiative will be extended to persons who have been allocated lots in other schemes across the country.
Trinidad and Tobago's beaches remain among the country's most valuable tourism assets, and the government is intensifying efforts to preserve them. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government is addressing the Sargassum influx not only as an environmental concern, but also as a critical initiative to safeguard the tourism sector. Here's more from TTT Live.
We are not at a stage where we are notorious for sargassum internationally. I don't think we are at a stage where a tourist will say, I will not go to Trinidad because they have sargassum on their beach. We are not at that stage.
The Sargassum Management Initiative, spearheaded by the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, is focused on keeping beaches and the environment clean and creating business opportunities. With specialized equipment now deployed, the aim is to protect Trinidad and Tobago's coastlines and preserve the country's tourism appeal. While Trinidad and Tobago is not yet internationally associated with sargassum, Line Minister Khadija Amin noted that proactive management is essential to keeping it that way.
But we are known for our beautiful beaches, and to prevent, as I say, this from continuing as a nuisance, we have to, from a waste management perspective, get the sargassum off the beach. That is part of the role of local government, getting the garbage out. And as I said, this is an added benefit but it does fall within our remit because this is local economic development.
The initiative extends beyond environmental management, creating opportunities for communities that rely on tourism. The government is gathering data to determine the support entrepreneurs will need before expanding the program.
I like to be driven by data. It is my belief that we have to do some data collection in terms of people's interests and what the gaps would be in terms of training, in terms of mentorship, in terms of demonstration projects, pilot projects, and mechanisms to increase dispersing resources. We have to look at what exists, what interests there are, and what needs there are.
The long-term goal is to develop a sustainable program that combines research, innovation, and collaboration to strengthen coastal communities.
But it must be structured as we go forward. I want this to be a sustainable project when we are finished, and gathering more data is also part of our immediate plan. So in the near future, we will continue with some data collection. I've been meeting with teams from the University of the West Indies. We do have students who have completed PhD studies in sargassum processing, and they have some very interesting findings, but we have to look at what is economically viable.
Sargassum may be washing ashore in growing volumes, but the government believes that with the right management, it can protect Trinidad and Tobago's beaches while strengthening the country's tourism sector. I am Faith Chariot, keeping it green for TTT News.
In sports, we're on the pitch with cricket. The ICC has approved major changes to its two flagship tournaments, the Men's Cricket World Cup and the Men's T20 World Cup, after wrapping up its annual board meetings in Edinburgh. Here's more from Nasir Mohammed.
The ICC Men's Cricket World Cup will retain its 14-team format, but with a revamped three-stage structure. Round 1 and Round 2 will now carry greater stakes, funneling into a high-intensity Super 7 round-robin stage before the semi-finals, a format the ICC says adds context, competitiveness and consequence right from the tournament's opening match. The Men's T20 World Cup will expand its second stage from 8 to 10 teams, giving emerging nations more room to shine, while still keeping the door open through group stage qualification. New eliminator matches between second and third place sides will now decide the final spots in the semi-finals, adding extra jeopardy to the closing stages. The board also cleared a new qualification pathway for the 2028 T20 World Cup. Scotland goes straight into the Europe Regional Final, while other 2026 participants advance directly to a global qualifier, alongside teams from regional events across Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas and East Asia Pacific. A possible new marquee event for associate nations is still to be finalized, pending review in November.
The West Indies women completed a dominant 3-0 one-day international series sweep over Ireland with a 64-run victory in the third and final match at Brady Cricket Ground this week, strengthening their position in the ICC Women's Championship. After being sent into bat, the Caribbean side posted 257 all-out thanks to a second successive century from Stephanie Taylor, who was named Player of the Match. Captain Hayley Matthews earned Player of the Series honors for her all-round performances throughout the series. And that's it for the news on PBCJ. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBCJamaica. And remember, we are the People's Station.